Hello, everyone, and welcome to our program. I'm Susan Waldman, Senior Manager of Membership and Publications, and it's great to see everyone today. In celebration of Women's History Month, NAMIC is proud to feature a fireside chat with Joiava Philpott, SVP and General Counsel at Cox Communications, and one of NAMIC's esteemed next generation leaders. A NAMIC Next Generation Leader is an extraordinary leader who has made indelible marks within their organization and the industry. Our moderator for today is Anne-Marie Burton, Chief Programs and Strategy at NAMIC. Today's chat is being recorded, and the recordings will be shared with you after the program, and will also be shared on NAMIC's YouTube channel. Please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A feature. And we are going to start our program with a short video that highlights Joiava's career accomplishments. And then we're going to hand it over to Anne-Marie, who will begin the discussion.
I think anyone who knows Joiava's attributes would describe her as really a results-driven executive who embodies diversity and inclusion and how she comes to work every day.
Joiava is just an all-around leader. She is an all-around expert. She is a great lawyer. She is a great mentor. She is a great friend.
She's very authentic, and that's what really connects her with the folks in our department. It is so easy for diverse individuals to see their career taking a similar trajectory that Joiava's career takes.
Promoting diversity and inclusion and equity is just part of my leadership DNA. It's not the sort of thing that I do off the side of my desk. My main goal is to remain mission focused. And sometimes that can be a little challenging when you're the only one in the room, the only person of color. And so to be recognized for doing something that to me is as meaningful as my skills and expertise as a business and legal executive, it's humbling.
Joiava has been a mentor of millennials and young people of color from the start of her career at Cox. She participates in formal mentoring programs through NAMIC and through the African American ERG.
She also mentors youth. She is a Girl Scout troop leader. She has mentored those girls for years. They love her.
She understands the importance of giving back and how others can be successful when you do that.
Some of the advice that I have received from mentors is really centered around not being afraid to take risks. I have been encouraged to step out there and to be comfortable with discomfort and to really just understand that we have to move beyond our fears. And once we start doing this, we start leading by example. That really does empower others to do the same.
One of the reasons why I have my current role is because Joiava took an interest in me. She does that for others. She takes this genuine and distinct interest, and through that, she empowers, she motivates, and really helps us to strive to be better.
The important part really is for them to connect with all different types of people. So people that are of a different race, a different nationality, a different gender, sexual orientation. The real connection is the human part of what we do and when we interact with one another. And that type of focus really can have the effect of catapulting a young professional's career in ways that they never imagined.
Not only is Joiava a bright executive, she's a senior leader who knows how to build bridges.
She's educated me and many other leaders to see the strengths and attributes of many of the diverse candidates at Cox. She also helps and supports those people to be developed. She gives them direct input. She's also helped promote many, many diverse candidates. Because of her, we are a better company and we have much better leadership at Cox.
I am deeply appreciative and honored to receive this recognition. I would like to accept this award on behalf of my incredible team. I am privileged to lead a group of phenomenal leaders who are forward-thinking and who bring their best selves to the workplace every day. I'd also like to thank my mentors and sponsors who have led the way by example, and to the entire Cox leadership team that shows up mightily to promote diversity and inclusion. And I would also like to thank my husband and my daughter who cheer me on each and every day. Thank you.
Woo! What a video. What an intro, Joiava. Welcome. I am deeply honored and thrilled to have this fireside chat with you today. And to everyone who's joined us, we have 60 individuals on the line. Welcome, welcome to NAMIC. We are so thrilled to have Joiava. I think after that introduction, the best I can do is jump right in, you know? So as Senior VP, and general counsel with responsibilities, I think we had legal, regulatory policy, government affairs, and of course, with so much going on in the communications industry, how do you maneuver through it all?
Well, Anne-Marie, first, thank you so much for the invitation to participate in this fireside chat. And I appreciate you sharing the video. I was deeply honored to be selected as a next generation leader by NAMIC. So thank you. I'm glad to be here. So that's an interesting question. How do I maneuver through it all? And I guess, to be honest, the answer is I don't, right? I am fortunate to have a dynamic team of best-in-class legal professionals, and they are fully equipped to lead the company alongside with me. And so I would say, you know, there are several ways really that I look at how to stay on top of everything. First of all, is having conversations, being informed by my leadership team. And it's also very much reminiscent of being in law school. There's a lot of reading that has to be done. And so, you know, really to be effective, to be informed, to be a better leader so that I can help serve the people who are on my team, my peers, my boss, and really protect and look out for the best interests of the company, I have to take the initiative upon myself to do the extra. And the extra really does mean staying on top of the trades, understanding what's happening in the business, from a technology, from a government affairs, legislative policy perspective, understanding where the risk pain points are in the industry and for companies like mine. So it's you know, having those informed conversations. It's staying up on my reading and on the trades and on the legal analysis, and it's also reaching out outside of my company, right? And so it's making sure that I'm having conversations and interactions and participating in forums with other general counsels, other GCs, and just making sure that I'm very forward thinking in what's coming down the pike.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and kudos to your team. That was a testament of great leadership, being able to make sure that you're delegating. I think that is key. Behind every successful Joiava is a great team. So thank you for that. So we recently celebrated Black History Month, and now we are celebrating, you know, Women's Month. So it's a double whammy for us. Great celebration, 2 months in a row. And so this question is really about, as a woman of color, what have been some of your biggest career obstacles and how did you overcome them? Now, of course, that's a two-part question because we're going to want to know about your successes as well. But let's tackle the biggest career obstacle.
Yeah, so I'll just say this for those who are participating in and viewing this webinar, I am definitely a glass half full person. And so it is actually difficult for me to even answer that question, but I will say, obviously, there have been obstacles, right? There have been lessons learned, there have been mistakes. But I would say, just in terms of one of the major obstacles confronting me as a woman of color in the industry has really been, by and large, what's been in my head, right? And so, you know, coming up, you know, as a young professional, as a lawyer working in a corporate environment, generally on far too many occasions, I found myself being the only one in the room, the only Black woman in the room at the table with more senior level executives. And so earlier on in my career, all of the, there was a lot of chatter in my head. And I can say this, and it may sound like I had somewhat of an inflated, self view of myself, but I actually thought that I carried the weight of all, Black women and African American women professionals, lawyers, in-house counsel on my shoulders. And I felt as though going into some jobs, some meeting rooms, some board rooms, some assignments, some conversations, that if I mess this up, I have blown it for everyone else coming after me. And that's a pretty hefty, burden to carry around. And that was weighing me down, and it was taking me off of my mission. We heard in the video the importance of staying mission focused. One of the things that I learned, and it was not too long ago when I went through the NAMIC Executive Development Leadership Program, and we learned about staying mission focused and making sure that we understand as people of color leaders that our main goal, our number one priority at work, is showing up, excelling, doing the work, and making sure that the results, right, that we put out there really do help advance the objectives of the company. I mean, that's really the mission in the workplace. That's what we're there to do. And as leaders, my view is that we should focus on excelling. So I would just, to answer that question maybe a little bit more succinctly, I would say that the obstacle is being distracted by the fact that I'm one of few, or maybe the only, right? And the way that I overcame that really had to do with reading up, learning. I always knew, even as a young professional, that I aspired, right, to lead a department. And so this whole notion of leadership, how do you get there from here, was a bit of a mystery to me early on in my career. I had some mentors, but I was just kind of developing and articulating my trajectory. And so once I did that, I was able to target and start having mentors that I could have those career conversations with. But early on, I hit the books. And so I got my hands on, articles, Wall Street Journal articles, books about leadership. I really do believe that as leaders, we should be lifelong learners. And so the way that I started to overcome that obstacle was by reading and immersing myself in what does it take to become really good and to ascend in one's career. And once I started focusing on all of that, all of those distractions around being the only woman, the only Black woman, the only person of color in the room, it became secondary. And so that was just the way that I dealt with that obstacle.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. I'm looking in the chat feature, and some people are referring to imposter syndrome and talking about being imposter syndrome being real. And what you just talked about reading really reminded me of a quote I just saw yesterday that said, "You are what you read." And I thought that was really powerful, right? Initially, you can glance over that, but in a place and in a world where we have so much access to information, but you've got to think through what information you're digesting and what's taking more of that precious time in your memory bank, right? So I'm glad you mentioned reading and being proactive in terms of sharpening yourself, knowing yourself, and trying to grow yourself in the various facets that you are looking to grow. I think that is powerful and something that I encourage everyone attending to really consider. What are you reading? Are you part of a book club? I had you talking about mentors, and we're going to touch on that, right? And even champions. And so there are other facets that we'll touch on. And of course, I can't let it go by you naming ELDP. It is amazing. I am an alumni as well. And it is one of the best programs you can take as an executive leader in terms of grounding you in who you are and how you move forward. And I love that you talked about being mission focused means sometimes closing out the noise, and the noise can be you, it can be environmental, other external factors. So that was powerful. Thank you for that.
Thank
now
you.
Let's talk about the part that we all like, right? The successes, so tell us about your successes and which ones have been particularly meaningful victories for you.
Sure. I would say that my successes have generally come from those times when I have stretched myself, when I have raised my hand to do what seems hard, not what seems impossible, but to at least do things that maybe few others would raise their hands to take on. And so, just one example is when I was with a former company, and I decided that, a 50 member department that I was managing needed to really raise its visibility throughout the entire company, right? This is 20,000 employees or so that this particular team supported. And so I decided that I would put together a curriculum that defined our work area and what we did, and really open that training up to the entire leadership of the organization. Now, for me, that was a stretch because I am a horrible event planner, number one. And number two, I tend to, go really deep in trying to convey information to the audience. So it was a stretch for me because I knew I had some shortcomings, and I needed to reach out and partner with other individuals that could help me pull this off. And I there are many reasons why I consider this a success. One of the reasons is because even though it was my idea, I could not be successful without having other partners join. Right. And so then it could no longer be my idea. And really the way that I was successful, or we were successful in presenting the idea, because it did involve significant travel, it involved a budget, it involved, a production team to pull this off. But the way to really present that and make the business case was not only to map out what I believe the benefits were going to be overall to the business, but also having other people there with me to help present and help lend their voices to what I was trying to accomplish. So, event planning, not necessarily my strength. And then the other piece was, as a lawyer, and maybe this is true of other people in general, I don't mean to disparage attorneys for those that are out there, but maybe for others who maybe have a specialized technical training, right? There's something to be said about learning how to speak to executives or to the business in a way that's comprehensible, right? And so for me, in terms of trying to put together this training material and this curriculum, I very much needed to have boundary partners that I could bounce ideas off of, that I could play this back. Does this make sense? And so, at the end of the day, we were successful in our first year, and then it turned into an annual training event. So I would very much consider that to be one of my successes. And I know we're talking about successes as a woman of color. And again, I didn't mention that this had to do with my being a woman of color, but yes, in case you were wondering, I was, right, the only woman of color, African-American woman in this instance, that was leading this effort, right? And one of very few who was actually, on the dais, and who was responsible for inviting and trying to get the attention of our C-suite level executives to come participate, say hello, have a quick voice on the agenda. And again, I would say I count that as a success because it goes back to, by that time I was beyond just all of the noise, as you put it, Anne Marie, in my head. But I was very much mission focused, and the event turned out well and beneficial to the company.
Excellent. Wow. That story is, I just love it. Thank you, Shanice. Boundary partners are needed for every good leader. I was just about to pick up that nugget. And I think one powerful thing that I want to reinforce that you just said, you had an idea, right? And you are very humble in what you could and could not do. But what I really want to hone in is the fact that you had boundary partners, and you had individuals that you could vet the idea, right? Before just saying, I'm smart, I'm brilliant, I have it now, I'm off to the C-suite and here we go, right? And a lot of times when people are being inspired to take a seat at the table, or to contribute to an area or just be creative, be innovative. I think everyone is told that. And then, and we do this in ELDP as well, and in some of our other programs, right? What do you count your votes? Have you vetted the idea among your peers and others? Do you have enough people saying yes to the idea, but also helping you sharpen the idea before you get to the very top, right? Because that's always, in politics, that's why you see them counting their votes before they bring a bill to the floor. How many yeses do you have in the room? How much buy-in do you have, right? So
Yeah.
Joiava, I love that, because what if somebody else had the same idea and was like, well, I don't have to be the only one doing it. Let's
Right.
join forces, right?
Right.
So I really love that nugget, because a lot of times when people are aspiring to grow and to become leaders, they want to run alone, right?
Right.
And
right.
I think what you just said was
Right.
so powerful.
Right.
Coalition building, getting others involved, and building champions along the way, I think is a very powerful strategy, and one that worked for you. So
yeah, it is. And I appreciate you calling that out, Anne Marie, because I mean, even to this day, I still do that. And, some of my friends and colleagues may say, well, because they know I have a government affairs background, right? Regulatory affairs, that might be being a little too political. But to your point, I think it's being astute, right? To have sometimes the meeting before the meeting. And it also helps to get a different perspective, because you just might learn something that maybe changes your approach. And so there's value, right, in diversity of thought and in having those candid conversations and helping to get the buy-in, even if those conversations don't turn out to be exactly what you expected, right? Everyone is not going to say, oh, yes, that's a great idea. I agree, go for it. What you really want to try to get people to open up to is, what am I missing?
Right.
Tell me, what are you thinking? And really making sure that you get that feedback, right? That will help you hopefully lead others to a place that you believe will produce the optimal results.
Absolutely. And you know what? We have a question in the chat feature that I think builds on this very point. So Montario Woodson, thank you. Very good question. Keep the questions coming. She's asking, we're often seen as having to do twice as much to get half the credit. How have you turned frustration into either motivation or success?
Right. Twice as much and half the credit. Yeah, I've heard that, and I understand what it means. And and being candid, I have felt that way before. But what I try to do is not focus on that. Because what I will tell you is that I have had multiple conversations with lots of different people, people who are not people of color, who are not women, who feel that way as well. And it may be because of, where they are in their career. It may be because of the position that they hold. It may be because they're in a particular job that's not the greatest fit. It may be because they don't have a supportive leader. But if you're feeling that way, that you are doing twice as much, you're getting half the credit, you're not getting the recognition, then it's time to really be introspective first, right? Have an honest conversation with yourself and examine how you're showing up. Are you taking advantage of opportunities to tell your story, to let individuals know what you're doing, what you're working on, this massive project that, it is, maybe you wouldn't say it's twice as much work as others, but you can help create your own story. There are some, I've recognized this, I heard this, so I didn't make it up, but I heard or read that, we have to be mindful of taking advantage of just, walk through conversations, maybe, with a senior leader or a leader or someone within your organization who says, in past, oh, hey, how's it going? How you doing? What you up to? And it's easy to say, oh, I'm good. I'm great. Oh, everything's good. But, being intentional about, oh, things are great. I just completed working on this major project, and it resulted in, us establishing this whole new process for collections. And I'm excited because it looks like there's the potential to really bring in, additional funds to the company. So I think if we're feeling that way, we should, there are lots of reasons, right, behind all of that, but I think it's important to evaluate. And then the other thing is to have conversations with other people, right? You should, we should all in our career have trusted advisors, people, colleagues that we can go to and get, feedback from, and have conversations with them, with your peers. Maybe it's with their mentor, and just what you share. I feel like I'm like working so hard and I'm not getting the credit. Have conversations about that and really seek some guidance or input. I hope I answered the question. If not,
Yes.
find me.
I believe you did, and we're seeing more questions coming in. So please keep the questions coming in. I'm taking a look at both sides. So I'll make sure that I read your question. And if you have a question and I haven't read it, it's because it's coming. So don't worry, I see them. We're going to address all the questions as they're coming in. Thank you, and keep them coming. All right, let's talk about the field of social justice here. Let's kind of take a different turn here. So obviously many companies have stepped up in the aftermath of so many tragic deaths over the last 2 years, right? We know George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, just to name a few. Is there a model for addressing social justice that works within corporate America?
Yeah, I appreciate you calling out those names. I just feel so strongly about making sure that we don't forget and that we not shy away from calling the names of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and there's so many more. But we should call those names out even in our work conversations. So thank you for that, Anne Marie. So I think your question was, is there a model for addressing social reform? And I would just say there are probably many models for addressing social reform. And the models are probably, they're nuanced, I'm sure. The way I'd like to respond to that really is maybe with my own personal knowledge and speak a little bit about my company. And so really in the aftermath of George Floyd, we were all working remote. And of course, everyone in the world, right, watched that on TV, watched the murder of George Floyd. And we also saw playing out lots of protests. And so, so here's a model that worked at Cox. First of all, we had leaders that, there were communications that from our CEO, from our enterprise company, from the president of the division that I work from. There were communications that went out across all of the company's employees that identified the fact that something horrible had happened and that this occurred, and it was an event that was surely impacting the lives of the communities that we serve and the employees in our company. So I would say one model is to certainly address what is happening, because we know that what's happening, in our communities and outside of our corporate and work environments, our work environments are really just a microcosm in many instances of what's happening outside of the workplace. So the acknowledgement that something has occurred and that people are hurting was one. It was an amazing feat. And I say it was an amazing feat, if you will. It was a success, a success in terms of leadership, because I had spoken to many individuals around that time. Their company leaders hadn't done that. And I thought, wow. And you had, hundreds of thousands of employees that were really hurting. They were distracted, during the workday. There was lost productivity. And in some instances at some companies, no one even reached out to say they care. So leaders at my company at Cox went a step further. Many individuals, Black and African-American employees in particular, received phone calls from leaders. How are you doing? I received, one from the president and from many other leaders and peers within our organization, colleagues, reaching out. How are you doing? And it was even more than that. It was, well, how's your family? Well, how's your husband? I mean, oh my goodness. So there's that. And then we went a step further in terms of having listening forums that were open to everyone in the company, and they were, arranged in small breakout groups. And I must say, and I've shared this internally within my organization, that I was skeptical when I knew that these listening forums were happening. And I was skeptical only because I know I was emotionally raw, and I just thought, oh my gosh, I don't know how these conversations are going to go. But Cox's leadership was courageous enough to say, well, we are going to present a forum for people to talk. So that was a great step, right? So the model, or a model, is certainly, in addition to acknowledgement, reaching out to employees, showing that you care. We recognize something is happening here in the world. This is a monumental shift that maybe we haven't experienced in this generation in the workplace. And then creating an opportunity for people to talk, to emote, and to communicate, and really creating that environment in a safe space. And what I really loved about these listening forums is that there was an acknowledgement that, there may be discomfort, right, just in terms of the conversation, but let's give everyone the grace, right, to have the conversation. And so we did that. And then we actually rolled out an Action Speaks program where we had different pillars, and they were around making sure that we look very intentionally at, of course, our hiring and promotional practices. Let's make sure that we tie incentives to making sure that we have diverse candidates, diverse panels, so that when candidates are coming to interview with us, they have the benefit of seeing that we do have diverse leadership. There was another pillar around social justice reform. And so through our government affairs organization, looking at opportunities where the company might be able to lend a voice. So the Georgia hate crime legislation is one example that of something that we got behind. So, in addition to that, there was a closer look, just as part of our Action Speaks campaign, a closer look at supplier diversity. And what I also just really appreciated was we started looking at HBCUs in particular. But there is a way for us to make impact. I graduated from Hampton University, so shout out to Hampton University and other HBCUs. So there was really a very fulsome approach to what we were doing. And I just identified a few, but the important thing is that there was the acknowledgement, there was the showing of care, there was the opportunity to create a forum, so for individuals to talk about what is happening. And then there were multiple areas where the company knew that we could increase our focus. The last thing that I will say is that the model for social reform in corporate America, if you haven't started it, now is the time, right? And so fortunately, at Cox, we already embodied a culture of diversity and inclusion. And so it really wasn't like, odd or foreign, or it did not seem disingenuous that we were standing up all of this work, because we had already started the work, many, many years ago. I joined the company 10 years ago, and the work obviously had already begun long before I came to the company. So there's just, some highlights of a model that is working, and there's still, continuous work to be done.
Wow, I didn't know all that. That is amazing. That is powerful. One of I applaud Cox for doing that. I think that is a model that others can begin, and if they have other ideas, they can build from. I think you have a very strong foundation in what you just proposed, because it was multifaceted. But one of the most powerful things, just to kind of focus on the listening, right? I think that is key, because you have to show up as your whole self at work, right? And so if there's no space for you to be who you are, to feel, to engage in what is one of the most disturbing instances in our society. I mean, they've been worse, but as you rightly said, many of us may not have experienced that, right? And so for us to have seen it in its heinous and gruesomeness, I think that it was just was starting at a place where people could have a conversation, right? And I think one of the things I want to pick out is this idea that people were getting phone calls, right? And as you think about a model, and we think about leadership being top down, right, lateral, who was making those calls? I think as people are thinking about how do you show you care, how does this become not a one-time thing, is something that I know you didn't go into that level of detail, but I think who makes those phone calls also matters, right?
Right.
Yes, there's the phone call, and then there's who's making the phone call, aka who's taking time to know that I matter, to show that they care, right? I think that I just wanted to tease that out, because it's not just any phone call, right?
Well, right. Yeah, no, exactly. And I just to be clear, the calls were coming from our CEO, our president, our C-suite level leaders, and leaders throughout the organization. I mean, so everyone may not have a relationship or may not have received, of course, right, a call from the C-suite, but their leaders, right, called them and reached out to them. I had people on my team that I lead, right, that were calling me. And so we absolutely, we have a culture of inclusion, and we certainly have a culture that is steeped in communication and making sure that we have that human connection. So there were lots of phone calls that were taking place. And that made me just really exceptionally proud to be a part of the organization.
Thank you. And I just want to tease out another word that you've used 4 or 5 times, and that is to say culture, our culture, right?
Sure.
Culture is intentional.
Yes.
Culture will eat your mission for lunch. Culture has to be very intentionally developed within an organization. So I love that you kept going back to the culture, right? Because you could have the most amazing mission, but if you don't cultivate the necessary culture, that will normally not give you the results that you intended, right? So thank you.
Very true.
Thank you for pointing that out. So let's kind of go back. So we talked about what Cox is doing, and I know you're at the forefront of that, obviously, as a senior leader within the company. How do you infuse diversity and inclusion into how you lead? So, we know that the events happen. We know that there's a culture. So how is this happening 24/7, 365,
Right. Well, if you're asking about me as an individual leader, I would say just modeling what diversity and inclusion could look like. And it really is as simple as, for me, because I hire people, right? And I have people who on my team who hire people. And so it's making sure that we are mindful and that we're intentional about candidates, and making sure that we are casting an intentional net, making sure that we are working with our talent acquisition team when maybe we get resumes and it's not, sometimes it's just not, you can't tell if candidates are diverse, but you can certainly partner with your talent acquisition team, say, where are we getting our candidates from? Because we've got some great diversity organizations within our industry that that we can post and that we can share openings with. And so it's just being intentional and making sure that we're looking at candidates, we're making sure that we are at least looking in those places where we can attract a diverse slate of candidates. I mentioned earlier, just asking questions when my team members are hiring or when I'm hiring. And I just asked this question the other day of a couple of people, oh, who's on your panel? Who's doing the interviewing, right? And it's just having those intentional questions and asking, because it helps everyone keep it, at the forefront. And I would also say that, so there's a hiring and the recruiting piece, and making sure that we're doing everything we can to increase our chances of having diverse candidates from which to choose from. And on the inclusion piece, that really is tied to the panel, right? And making sure, if I went on a job interview and I interviewed with 3, 5 people, none of them were a person of color, none of them were a woman, I probably asked the question, right? But I'd be very curious. And so I think that's important because it demonstrates, intentionality when it comes to inclusion. And there are other ways. So mentoring is one. I always loved that at Cox, they were very intentional about, or we were very intentional about mentoring and making sure and encouraging mentoring amongst individuals that did not look like each other. And so you actually started having individuals coming to you saying, hey, I am looking for a mentor and it needs to be someone that doesn't look like me. I was hoping that maybe we could get into a mentoring relationship. And because we know that's part of our culture, it takes the awkwardness kind of out of it, right? And so, so for me, I'm a formal mentor signed up to to participate as a mentor in our formal mentoring programs. And then I'm also very receptive when individuals ask me to be their mentor. And I am just always tickled because I get like tons of different types of people that want me to mentor them. White men, right? White women, men and women of all different nationalities. And I try to take time to showcase that, right? And I tell individuals who are coming to me about mentoring, especially if they are people of color or Black women, make sure I'm not your only mentor, okay? And if you need help, making introductions, I'm happy to be that bridge because your mentors, your sphere of influence in terms of, who you go to, who you lean on, that should be diverse. And that's something that I try to, coach my employees around. And because it really is all about making sure that you are in a diverse environment so that you can hear diverse thought, you can get the benefit of just hearing different views. The inclusion piece, that's interesting. Just in terms of, we talk about diversity, right? That's, just differences. The inclusion piece is making sure that people feel welcome and that they are really invited to be, at the table and to speak and to, have dinner and participate in dessert and everything. That's the inclusion piece. And so modeling that is just something that requires intentionality. If there are individuals that are of a different nationality, asking them about it. Cox is really great just around, and I know many other companies have ERGs, right? Employee resource groups, but we celebrate whatever Heritage Month there happens to be. And so I try to change my background setting to reflect that and to actually have conversations with people that are of a different ethnicity, right? To say, oh, let's talk about what's going on this month. We're celebrating, Asian Heritage Month or, Hispanic Month. Let's talk about what are you doing? And so creating those environments are just what we have to be. Sometimes it's really less scientific, but it's just more intentional in terms of how we make people feel comfortable in their own skin.
Yeah, I like that. And celebrating cultural events goes a long way. What you just shared and changing the background, subtle things really show that you care, right? And I'll tell you one thing that I grew up with because of my background and having traveled extensively. I've been blessed to be able to learn at least how to say good morning, how are you? You look great, right? In as many languages as I can. Great. Yes. And I have found that to be such a bridge. Anytime I'm introduced to someone from a different culture, either, I'll say it in their religion, or I'll say it in their, tribe language, what have you, or a symbol or something. And it is amazing how you see the spark immediately, right? Yes. So just anecdotally, we went to feed the homeless. It's something I do with my sons. Mm-hmm. And we asked everybody to introduce themselves, right? And then, and as we were doing that, there were people from various countries. And so as they told us what country they were from, I would greet them and they just lit up, right? Like there's somebody who knows me or something about me, right? And I just found that a really small gesture, right? like saying hello in a different language. You'd think it's insignificant, but it really it matters. It means you see me, right?
Yes.
You see, and I think that is so key to inclusion. Inclusion is about seeing people,
Yes.
right? And it's, as you said, it's not scientific. It's building that culture and community. So let's see. I was going to stick with the equity theme, but the questions are popping in. So let me move to our questions here. Let's see. Oh, Lakaisha. Hey, Lakaisha. Lakaisha asks, what are the top 3 things you did when you entered a new role to ensure you had a good pulse of where you could add value? Wow.
The top 3
things you did when you started a new role to ensure that you could, you had the right pulse, kind of like, the sixth sense to know where you could add value.
Yes. I get it. And thank you for the question. I've had that experience in terms of moving around and joining new organizations. And and this was a lesson that I learned, and that is around the importance of number one, when you come into an organization, to look around, right? Try to understand what the I'll call it culture, but really try to understand what the rules of engagement are. Right? What's spoken, what's unspoken. But the way that you do that is through connecting with people. And so I would say the first thing really, in order to accomplish that or start learning that in terms of the culture and the vibe of the organization, is to just introduce yourself to people, get on their calendars. I'm new. Would love to, have a few minutes with you to learn more about your organization. And you can do it strategically, right? I mean, you look at, you should know, right, when you start a new role, who your boundary partners are going to be, who it is that you're going to be interacting with. And then of course it's your team, it's skip levels, but really taking the time when you first join an organization to connect with people, to listen and learn, right? And just start, understanding and learning what those different dynamics are. I would say, so that would be the first thing. The second thing is to, really make sure that you're learning the industry. If it's a new industry, you want to make sure that you understand it and where your company sits in it. You of course, want to know everything that you can learn about your organization. You want to understand who the leaders are. You want to understand, what the strategic priorities are, and you want to have this global perspective of your organization outside of, the specific area or the team or the department that you have come in to lead. So I would say that those are the first 2 things. And then I would say the third thing is, at some point shortly after joining the organization, you've connected with individuals, you've invested in learning about the company and about the industry. Then you want to make sure that you are soliciting feedback, right? And so this is, maybe it's 90 days, definitely no more than 6 months. You want to go back to some of the key strategic partners that you have and boundary partners, and you want to say, hey, we had a great connect, right? When I first came into the organization, and I wanted to share with you some of the things that I've been doing, or I'd like to get your feedback. And if you're in a support role, and that's primarily what I know, right? Being an attorney, my question is usually after those first, some roughly 4 to 6 months going back, is would love to hear your feedback on, what am I doing well, right? What could I be doing better? And what's working for us. So I may have given you 4 things, but Lakaisha, there you go.
That's really good. Lakaisha, all I can say is hit the ground learning. Most people say hit the ground running. I say hit the ground learning, right?
That's
Not
right.
running. All right. So guess what? Shanice has a question. Hey, Shanice. She says, diversity is the multi-ethnic richness. Inclusion is at the table, the appetizer to dessert. How do we get to the equity piece of the equation?
Yeah, the equity piece. So equity, thank you, Shanice, Madam President and CEO of NAMIC. I appreciate the question. So yeah, the equity piece, right? That's the piece around compensation. It's around promotional opportunities. It's around the choice assignments. All of that, right, is grounded in at least my definition of equity. And how do we get to a place where we are being mindful and we're making sure that we are practicing equity and we have equitable treatment of employees. So I would say that as leaders, first and foremost, this is about harnessing your potential as a leader, right? So as leaders, we owe it to ourselves to understand, what all of those factors are. Certainly, if you are a people leader, then you should be, mindful, making sure that you are modeling that type of behavior in terms of, making sure that folks on your team are being considered for, opportunities and for assignments, stretch assignments, maybe, key mentoring relationships. If your company has those formal types of programs, because that's part of the equity piece as well. And when it comes to, salary and compensation and those issues, then if you're a people leader, then you have a direct line of sight and influence, right, with your HR business partner. And so this is where, having courageous conversations and not shying away from those issues is really important. Not to be trite, but it's, if you see something that maybe doesn't quite look right, then you should have a conversation to understand and just to ensure that you are viewing things like compensation and promotional opportunities through a lens of equity and fairness. And sometimes it's not as sometimes it's not as difficult as it might seem to have, not only to have the conversations, but to get the fix, right? Because in my experience, what I have seen is I have, looked at, especially coming into, different roles at respective different organizations, you come in and you're trying to get the lay of the land. So then you start asking questions, right? Which is a great way to start having dialogue and hopefully to have impact, is to ask questions. Why do we do it this way? Why is it, how is it that, this person or this category, right, or this level of employees are here? And, how do I, as a leader, ensure that there are opportunities for, multiple or other individuals on my team? So,
well said. Well said. So what I'm going to do is do rapid fire, because you will not believe it is 5:27.
I don't believe it. I just looked at the clock for the first time.
How
I do
fast is
not believe
time
it.
to go? Anyway, so we have about 4 questions. So we're going to do rapid fire. My last question is by TS. So if you all don't mind that will be the last question we'll be addressing today. So from the top, Joiava, what's the best advice, professionally or otherwise, you've ever received? And that was Monterio.
The best advice is don't be afraid to raise your hand, to take on the tough assignments.
Very good. What is the one biggest mistake you've made in your career, and what did you learn from it? And that is from Candy Price.
Oh, thank you for that question. So I would say the biggest mistake that I made is coming into a new organization thinking that I was smarter than everyone who had been there for previous years, and coming in just mission first, doing the work, head down, without pausing to do those things that I just shared with Lakeisha about, right? Getting to know the people, the organization, connecting with them. That set me back. It was the feedback that I got from my boss was that, wow, the people on your team, they don't know you. And they're asking like, well, who is she? She comes in and she's got this plan that she wants us to execute on, but who is she? So
Very good.
That was a failure that I had to correct. It took 6 months to overcome.
Some of us have been there. I know that. Okay. Andrina asks, what is the best length of time to start and end your mentorship? And do you recommend changing mentors every year?
The length of time for a mentoring relationship? I mean, I would say if it's a formal mentoring relationship, a year is usually it. But after that year, expires, you can still have hopefully mentoring conversations, right? And try to connect with that person occasionally.
All right, thank you. Tony Stubbs has asked, you mentioned having been the only one in the room. I imagine that could become exhausting. How do you stay energized?
I work out. I work out like 6-7 days a week, and I have a leisurely workout, but it clears my head. I listen to music. It takes me away from everything, and that's just how I clear my head. And the distractions really do dissipate, and I'm ready to hit the ground running when it comes to work.
Woohoo! So, wow, that concludes the end of the most powerful, energizing, full of nugget sessions we've had. And thank you so much, Joiava. This was amazing. Good questions. I think we could have had an hour and a half, right? And not have felt it fly by. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you for your time, Joiava. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
You're a member of the NAMIC board. We value you. You've been a great addition to everything we've just talked about and in many careers, as we saw on the video. We would love to have you again. But for today, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Joiava. Until next time, bye everyone.
Bye.
See you soon.
Thank you so much. Bye. Have a great evening.